backdrop there you have.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I wanted to make it a little interesting for viewers out there.
Yes, of course. I mean, wow, I got to watch the film and I love the animation. You had narrator. I never felt lost, which sometimes that can happen in a lot of films.
Oh yeah, yeah. Nowadays, especially with, I mean, you never know what you're gonna get. We have so much content to take in, and our movie especially is a very, I keep saying it's like a high octane kind of very fast paced, tongue-in-cheek movie. So, we thought the narration would be an additional element of playfulness that could one help guide the viewer, but also give it that familiar movie feel when you hear a narrator coming in and jumping into the story.
And I understand that for the animated part, I mean, that wasn't the original plan. You felt like you had to introduce it to elaborate the backstory of the characters. Is that right?
Yeah. So we it's funny because the script, the original script was much fuller and had a lot of backstory, had a lot of more subplots going on. And like all movies, you come up with time constraints. And one of the things we didn't have time to film was the kind of these little backstory bits, just to kind of set the stage. And I think more so than even the story, we wanted to set the stage, the tone of the movie, because it is such a playful kind of over the top movie. And we I had different ideas of how I wanted to approach those backstories after the fact once we were in editing, but the crazy thing was the pandemic hit and we all were kind of locked up inside, so it was like, how are we gonna finish this movie? Like literally there's gaps in the movie that need to be filled. And so animation was one of the solutions that we thought was a fun way to introduce the viewers into this kind of stylized world. And yeah, they were able to work while we all were locked up. And I was just like, devouring all the content that was coming in from them because it looks so beautiful and I think fits our movie so well.
Oh, so if they hadn't been for the pandemic, they would have gone back to shoot
I mean, who knows what we would have come up with, because at that point, let's say the pandemic hadn't hit, I really feel like we were coming up with so many creative ideas, playful ideas to make it feel kind of this tongue-in-cheek humor or whatnot, or playful visuals. I feel like it might have come up anyways. I feel like we might have been like, what are we missing here? What do we need to kind of really make this pop as the final stamp? And I could see us having had that conversation instead of shooting something else, just because for one, it's kind of nice to send it off and be like, for a movie like this, obviously if this was a heavy, gritty, grounded movie, we probably would have had to just go do more shooting. But for this, it was like, this is kind of a fun thing to do for us to go send it off. And I learned a lot about the process of animation and things that I've never even gotten to see. So it was really cool to incorporate that stuff and have people, they were excited to jump on board.
That's great. Yeah, animation definitely looks like a whole foreign language. I'm not familiar with anime at all, but I think it was really cool how you guys integrated that.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. It was a pretty colorful film too, besides the animation, I think. So it went perfectly. Based on the backdrop there, you have one of my favorite scenes. So much going on in that scene. Yes. Yeah. What was it like putting that together?
It was a challenge. This is one of my first films with like such an ensemble cast, and the climax in particular, we had like barely 3 days to shoot it. And ideally it would have been nice to have like a week to shoot just the climax alone, because there's so many moving parts, and having the entire cast there at the same time is one, it's really fun because you're like, wow, I haven't seen that character interact with that character. But at the same time, it's a challenge because you want to make sure everyone's getting their proper time to do what they need to do. And, we had multiple cameras running at that point to make sure our B camera was kind of picking up all the little details so we weren't missing anything. But it definitely was a challenge because you don't have time to kind of stop and breathe and work out the scene in the same way that you might with a dramatic scene where you're sitting there talking on one-on-one, being like, okay, let's try this. It's kind of just like, all right, get the gun, get this, the explosion happens, make sure it's safe. So it was chaos, but a learning experience. And I welcome that for hopefully the next films as my movies get bigger. It was definitely exciting.
I'm super curious to know how you found Diego Boneta, because I mean, just having his name in this film, you already won over all of Latin America.
Yeah, it was really cool because he is so passionate as an actor and as a person and all that he does, and that's exactly what we needed for this movie. Everyone involved needed to want, they had to want to be there and really want to bring something to it. And when his name came up, I was only vaguely familiar with him through his name's popped up a bunch because, we're kind of in the same range in terms of, I mean, he's killing it and doing amazing things. But in terms of looking for the same material, and his name came up and I started checking out his work and I was like, this is that like vibrancy, that passion we need for this character. And sure enough, when we met him, he embodied that, and he kept saying, he would talk about how he's like, where's my die in a gunfight? He wanted to play this character so bad. He was looking for roles that were in the vein of it, and luckily it's like, well, if you want to be in die in a gunfight, you can be, because you're perfect for this. And he just brought so many ideas and so many creative nuance to the character that it's everything a director could ask for in terms of, I was shocked, we would be filming and he would do something where I was like, whoa, where'd that come from? That was something you could tell he was ready to do, and he hadn't discussed with me. And it became a treat for me just watching him act. I was like, man, this dude is a movie star, and so I'm glad he has such a fan base already, but I think that's just going to continue to grow with each movie he does.
Yes, indeed. He was so much success after he did that Netflix series, Luis Miguel.
Oh yeah, it's incredible, and he sings, and it's just like, man, what don't you do? It's almost frustrating, but that's why he is, that's why he is where he is.
Yes, and much more success for him.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about, I'm sure you're getting it a lot, and I'm sorry, I'm also going to mention it, but Fine. You're getting probably a lot of this story being a little more modern day Romeo and Juliet.
Sure.
Only because you have, that family rivalry.
Yeah. It has those. Exactly. Like, it has those elements. And I think at glance, especially when we watch trailers and when we see a quick little image, we jump into what's familiar right away. And obviously Shakespeare is so part of our culture and always will be. So it's of course like an honor to be like compared in some ways, to that, because it is a big, extravagant Shakespearean world. But I'm glad you also say it's also something totally different, because, the writers even say they didn't even have that in mind when they were writing. It just kind of came into be, the feuding family thing. But to me, I was like, well, these aren't, 16-year-old teenage lovers who are naive and don't know what they're doing. These are kind of what I love, and what drew me to it was and the actors. They are kind of these beaten down, almost jaded, almost kind of, had to, like the Mary character, Alex Daddario, her character, it's described as a kind of a puppy that had to return to its cage, a bird that's been caged. And it's not just we're young and in love and we're going to make bad decisions because we are going with our emotions. It's like, no, we're kind of standoffish and cautious. And to me, the Ben and Mary lead characters are kind of the heart and soul of the movie, because they live in a more of a grounded space, where the rest of it is kind of this theatrical, very whimsical, character-y piece. Whereas for me, I was like, no, they bring some real heart to it, and it isn't just the same old Romeo and Juliet. It's a totally different thing, and we really based it on so many other movies like True Romance and Fight Club and a bunch of old school French New Wave films. All the stuff we loved watching when we were younger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I did have to emphasize, because I don't think it is. Like, you can see a little, but definitely not.
Good. I love that, and definitely keep saying that, because yeah, if people want it to be Romeo and Juliet, that's great, but definitely it's so much more than that.
Yeah, you want a love story, watch something else. Although this is a love story, but you got action, humor, you got a big thing with this film. So yeah, does not compare.
Cool. I'm glad you say that.
Yes. Let's talk about Mary's character.
Sure.
Alexandra. Now, I really liked how you made her look different, and how they even point her out to be weird. Which, like, nothing wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I thought one, working with Alex is amazing. She's so professional, just like Diego, that she just wanted to bring something fresh to it. And as I got to know her and started to see what she was doing with the character, I was like, this is exactly what it needs to distance itself from that young adult kind of. Yes, it has all that for young adults and for young people who want just the love story and kind of want to feel that adrenaline that they're feeling and teen angst and whatnot. But it's so much more than that. And she, more so than anyone, brought this very kind of weird, distant, cold nature to her character that was coming through. And I loved it because it challenged Diego, it challenged their characters. It made them feel more real and more like they had to overcome this. It's like when you meet someone that you haven't seen in years, and maybe there was a spark and there was a what if feeling. We all have those people in our lives, and she brought that in a way that I never thought, that I didn't even see, on the page when I was reading it. She kind of took what I wanted and ran with it. And she did. She made it kind of this her weird own thing. And I love it. Her eyes say so much, and she used that and used her kind of cerebral way of thinking to make the character feel like something that I haven't seen in movies like this.
Mm-hmm. During the scene where there's the evening party, a cocktail party, when she's kind of introduced, I was starting to get a gut feeling that she was going to be like a character kind of like Gossip Girl, really spoiled rich girl, and then it went like way off and I didn't see that coming. I loved it. That was a great highlight.
Good. I'm so glad, because that's how it feels. It feels like she should be in that world. She should be one of those people. And it wasn't written that way, luckily, but we also wanted to push this idea that, again, we didn't want these just to feel like spoiled rich kids, like, oh, boo-hoo, like your families are oppressive and you're, to me, it's like, no, like they're human, and they're, they feel broken from the world and want to live happy lives. And so I'm so glad the movie does kind of subvert expectations in that way. And so did she, playing the role.
Mm-hmm. And then the scene when she wakes up in his apartment and she's just kind of like, this is your apartment? And he's like, yeah, and the building around it.
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely some of those funny moments like that, and they're not meant to be over analyzed in any way in terms of, again, like, oh, okay, so he's some rich kid. I love that we play it like he's yeah, exactly, like they want to be real people and connect with the real world and be a part of it. And that his atmosphere there, we wanted it to feel like, he's the Robin Hood. He robs from the rich and gives to the poor. He has good intentions deep down. And he's trying to live that life and understand it. And someone once said, it was one of the people I talked to said, he's kind of like Bruce Wayne if his parents hadn't been killed. He should be Batman somewhere, but because he has money and he has this kind of this view of himself that he goes out in the night and gets beat up, but he doesn't know what to do with it, and so anyways, I like that we were able to showcase all that, their personalities through their world, through their settings and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So what was one of your favorite scenes shooting besides the chapel?
Yeah. Honestly, I think my favorite scene was maybe the scene where both Ben and Mary are in the like the room together. It's like kind of the intimate scene, because to me that felt like where I kind of shine most as a filmmaker, like really trying to get personal into these characters' heads. And when she turns on the record player and the music plays and they kind of have this moment together, that's the stuff that I love to film. And when you get to see actors act as natural as possible, so that was one of my personal favorites, because it brought me back to what I know best. But I also loved doing stuff with like Travis and Justin Chatwin, just letting them go crazy and kind of ham it up on screen. Those were just fun for me as a viewer, let alone director. I was just like, wow, I love watching these artists kind of put themselves out there and go crazy. So any of those scenes were fun, just as fun.
And as a director, what was more challenging? Because was it the action, integrating the comedy somehow?
Yeah, good question. I feel like it was balancing action and humor and romance. Just balancing those three factors definitely was a challenge, because you never have enough time. Like there's never enough time to do it right. And you're always like, that didn't quite land right. Or, that stunt wasn't quite perfect. How are we going to, you start having those thoughts that you don't want to have, which is like, how are we going to fix this in post-production? And, everyone says that we'll fix it in post, but you want to make sure you're getting it the best you can. So for me, it was, yeah, directing this, walking that tone, the tonal line of, is this a funny scene? Is this, you know, it's self-aware? Is the action supposed to, it should still thrill you in some ways, even though it's kind of heightened action. You know, it's not like watching some war movie where it needs to be so real. It's definitely stylized, but yeah, that was hard. It was hard to walk that line consistently and think of the bigger picture the entire time.
Well, that's great, Collin. Congratulations on this film. And like I said, you already won over Latin America.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You should work with him again.
Yeah, that means a lot, and I'm definitely going to work with him again. So I'm glad you think so, and I appreciate it.
Of course, aside of, you know, everyone else.
Yeah, right.
Well, take care.
Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate it.
Of course. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.